with our images is we want to edit them in Adobe Photoshop. So I've already got an image open, but to do that, go to File, Open, and then you can navigate to where you've saved your image that you're going to be working with. So I've got my image open, and I'm going to introduce you to the workspace in Photoshop. It looks a little complicated. It's not super user-friendly. I know when I first learned Photoshop, I found it pretty overwhelming. On the left-hand side are going to be all your tools, and so they're all listed right here, and it looks like there are lots of fun things to play with, but it can also get a little visually overwhelming. Underneath of each one of the tools are nested other tools, so if you click and hold, you'll see that you've got other tools underneath of it. So as I kind of go through, you can see that there's lots of other tools that are included in Photoshop as well. My main tool that I go back to if I'm accidentally in another tool and I kind of forget and kind of, like let's say I'm in my crop tool and I accidentally kind of get stuck in it, I always go back to my move tool. You can either go back and click on it, or you can just hit V on the keyboard and that'll get you back to your move tool. All of the tools that you're going to work with have a control panel up here where you can go through and you can edit different settings and different options within that. The first thing I like to do is go up to Window, go to Workspace, and set it to Essentials. If it's set in anything else, there could be lots of windows open. It could get visually confusing. So for me right now, the first thing that I do is I go to Window, Workspace, and just reset it back to the Essentials. Photoshop will open things in tabs. So I've got one tab open, here's another tab, here's another tab. So just keep in mind that your images are kind of nested right there at the top. And then another thing that I also find helpful is to say auto select, leave that turned on, and then have it set to layer. And that's a nice way to kind of move around Photoshop. On the other side of Photoshop is our layers palette. So I'm just going to pull this out so that you can see it. And your layers palette is where we're going to be working with our images. So the first adjustment that I want to make, and there's like 5 different places to find where to make your adjustments. The first can be here, which I like is a little half cookie, and we've got our adjustment layers. Over here, you'll notice that the same adjustment layers also showed up here, and as I hover over them, you'll see the name of it changes. And then you can also go to Layer and go down to New Adjustment Layer. What you never ever want to do is go to Image, Adjustments. This will actually put it right on top of the image, is pretty destructive to your image. We always want to make sure that we're working in layers. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and make a levels adjustment. And this is basic brightening or darkening of my image. So I'm going to go to levels. And then ideally, depending on your image, you can, if you bring it this way, that'll brighten it. Those are my highlights. If I bring it this way, it'll darken my shadow areas. What I tend to work with for just general lightness and darkness is going to be my gamma slider, which is right here. So I'm actually going to brighten it just a little bit. These are referred to as valleys and hills. If you've got a gap, you'll notice I've got a little bit of a gap right there. You want to bring those sliders into where they actually start. So I'm going to bring this one over just a little bit. And then I can also adjust right here as well. I'm going to close that, and you'll notice that right here, here's my levels adjustment. So I'm going to turn it on and off and see if I like that adjustment. The second adjustment that you're going to make, I'm going to go back down to the little half cookie. I'm going to go to Curves. And this is going to be just for adding contrast. So I'm going to click. And if I add a point, I can drag it up, and you can see that this is really horrible. If I drag it too far, this is really horrible. We want to make nice subtle adjustments right here. I'm going to add a point in the middle. If I pull it up, that's a lightening curve. If I pull it down, that's a darkening curve. We've probably already made that adjustment in levels. So this we're going to use to actually go through and play with adding some contrast. I'm going to drop a point about halfway down and halfway up. You don't ever want to add more than 3 points. These are my shadows. I'm going to pull my shadows down a little bit, and I'm going to pull my highlights up a little bit. And I'm going to see if I like how that looks. It's a little bit too contrasty for what I want. Some of you might have flatter images where you actually want to go in and make it a little bit more punchy, and you're welcome to do that. So you'll see I'll turn it on and turn it off. And I'll actually kind of, oops. See, that's what happens when you add an extra point. If you add any points like that, you'll see that as I click on it, it'll change to a white point. just hit delete and you're good to go. So don't feel like if you accidentally do that, that's the end of the world. You're pretty good. So, all right. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. The last adjustment that you might need to make to your image might be a color correction. So I'm going to click once again on the little half cookie, and I'm going to go down to color balance. My image is pretty color balanced already, but if your image looks too warm, you want to add blue to it. If your image looks too blue, you want to add yellow to it. You more than likely are not going to need to work with cyan, red, magenta, and green. That yellow and blue slider is pretty much all that you need to adjust your image. You'll notice I'm kind of making my image a little bit cooler by bringing and adding the blue into it. Once I've made my adjustments, once my image looks pretty good, what I'll do is I'll go to File and I'll go to Save, and this will be my master copy that I'm going to work with. And you'll notice I've got my last name. I'm doing a demo right now. And then we're going to save it as a Photoshop document. And the reason that we do that is so that we preserve all of these layers right here. We don't want to lose those layers. So I'm going to say Save. I recommend saving to your desktop, not saving to your cloud. The cloud can take a long time, and I've noticed that students have definitely lost some files by doing that. So I would suggest saving just right there onto your desktop. I'm going to say Save. I've done this demo a couple of times, so I'm going to actually put a number after it. You guys don't need to do that. Everyone always asks about this. Just go ahead and say OK. And then the next step that I need to do is I need to save a JPEG version of it. So I'm going to go File, and I'm going to go down to Save As. And then you'll notice my drop-down box is a little bit limited. This is a new change that Photoshop has made. What I actually want to do is say Save a Copy. So I'm going to click on that. And now I can go about halfway down to saving it as a JPEG. And you'll see it'll change to JPEG. And I'll say Save. Go ahead and set your image quality all the way to maximum. Say OK. And now you have your Photoshop version, and you also have your JPEG version.